Welcome back to another episode of The Next Shift. And as usual with this channel, I'd like to start this video with a question. If you hate your job, why would you stay in it? And you could probably respond right now with 101 reasons as to why you might need to stay in a job, whether it's stability, security, career trajectory, but that's not my question. It's want to stay in a job. And for most of the last decade, the answer seemed quite obvious and it's actually sort of publicized. And the answer would be you wouldn't want to stay in a job like that. And between 2021 and 2022 in particular, quitting became almost a national pastime in the Western world. Economists referred to that period as the Great Resignation. These periods are often referred to by recruiters as a candidate-led market or an employee-leveraged market, and workers walked away from jobs that didn't pay enough or didn't respect them enough or simply didn't feel worth showing up for anymore, confident that something was better just one application away. However, in 2026, that confidence has quietly disappeared. In August 2025, the Shrek consultancy Korn Ferry described a new pattern emerging across offices in both the US and the UK. Employees weren't quitting, they weren't even quietly disengaging, or this quiet quitting craze which you saw all across LinkedIn for a number of years. They were doing something closer to the opposite of everything we'd seen since the pandemic. They called it job hugging. The definition behind job hugging is really simple. Job hugging is when somebody stays in a role that they don't particularly want, not because they are happy, but because the alternative seems that much more riskier than staying still. It isn't about loyalty, although it's often mistaken by it, and it certainly isn't about contentment. It's closer to holding onto your job by the whites of your knuckles. And the data behind this shows how quickly things have shifted. In February 2026, a resume builder survey found that 57% of American workers now describe themselves as job huggers, and that's up from 45% just 6 months beforehand. In the UK, separate research from MetLife found that 56% of employees are staying in their current roles specifically out of necessity rather than out of desire, and only 18% of people say that they're staying because they genuinely want to be there. And concentrating on that final figure there, fewer than 1 in 5 people in the country right now currently say that they're there by choice. But what I do find quite interesting is the culture and behaviour around it that is coming out. Certainly a lot of the language that has sprung up within the last 10 months or so, and related phrases that have started circulating alongside it kind of showcase the culture that certainly the next generation have towards the workplace. There are such phrases as quiet cracking. Quiet cracking describes employees who keep showing up and doing the job while struggling silently underneath. Hybrid creep describes the slow, undocumented erosion of flexible working days that companies never formally cancel, but they just quietly expect more office attendance than the policy initially states. And I don't know whether it's because I'm a recruiter or a recruitment business owner that I worry a little bit more when an entire workforce is referring in a taxonomy around different flavors of being stuck or feeling unfulfilled in the workplace. Because to me, that's not a personal issue, that's a structural issue. So why is everyone hugging their jobs instead of leaving them? The most obvious answer behind this is the market itself. In the US, they have something called the quits rate. And the quits rate is the percentage of workers voluntarily leaving their job each month without something else lined up. And that fell to around 2.1% in mid-2025, down from a peak of roughly 3% during the Great Resignation. And that sounds like a small, progressive shift. And it represents millions of people deciding month after month that that door isn't worth walking through. But if we're talking markets, Britain isn't telling much of a different story. UK job postings have fallen by 11% since the start of 2026 alone, and now sit 32% below their pre-pandemic baseline, a far steeper decline than comparable economies like the US or the Eurozone. Graduate postings, which we've talked about a lot on this channel, specifically are down 7% year on year, and are sitting at their lowest level for this time of year since 2020. And when there are fewer jobs posted out there, then staying still doesn't become a preference, it's a rational choice. But I do think there is a second, far more interesting, far less discussed reason as to why job hugging exists and why it's spreading so quickly. And it's not because of how many jobs exist, it's because of who has the leverage in the market right now. My example behind leverage is if we go back 18 months, maybe 2 years, the story around flexible working was almost entirely written by employees. Surveys consistently found that most UK workers said they'd refuse a full return to work mandate outright, with more than half of fathers with school-aged children saying they'd actively look for a new job rather than comply. And from the data I've managed to find on this, that number has collapsed. A 2026 survey found that only 7% of employees would now quit over a mandatory return to office office policy change, down from 51% in 2025, January 2025, that is. Not because people's feelings have changed about commuting or their circumstances have necessarily changed significantly, but because their alternatives have. And we are entering a point of complete employer dictation. And once leverage does shift, everything downstream shifts too. Nearly 3/4 of HR leaders now admit that their return to office mandates would create real tension inside their organizations, a sense of injustice and something being quietly taken away. But tension isn't translating into resignations anymore because resigning requires somewhere else to go. In case I haven't used enough phrases within this video to describe absolutely every little thing that's happening within employment right now, Korn Ferry has started describing the emerging split as a hybrid hierarchy. Flexibility hasn't disappeared, it's simply stopped being something every employee gets and started being something that only the hardest to replace employees can still negotiate for. Everyone else just keeps hugging that job that they've got. No, I'm not trying to make a conspiracy here. There is no HR department out there, no matter how evil you think they might be, who have sat down and decided to make work worse just because people are afraid to leave it. It's simpler and, in a way, much more uncomfortable than that. It's just incentives responding to circumstances. The same quiet mechanism that's been running through every story this channel has covered so far. And there's an irony behind all of this, and there always seems to be one in my videos, and that's that job hugging doesn't actually make your job any safer. Career researchers have pointed out that employees who look disengaged or stagnant are sometimes more vulnerable during workforce reductions, not less. Staying still limits the pay growth that typically comes from moving roles or negotiating externally, and in some UK sectors, real wages have been falling for people who have never left their desks. You can do everything job hugging asks of you, keep your head down, hold on to what you have, and still end up worse off than the version of you that would have left 2 years ago. So if staying isn't protecting you and leaving doesn't feel possible right now, what exactly is job hugging solving? Maybe the honest answer behind all of this is nothing. Maybe it isn't a strategy at all. It's just what waiting looks like when an entire generation of workers has been asked to wait for a labour market that keeps promising to recover and keeps quietly not doing so. I hope you like this video. I hope you can give some relevant examples in the comment section below. Like, subscribe. It's been really interesting to see this channel grow so far. This has been The Next Shift, and I'll see you on the next one.